Shift happens, sometimes by choice, sometimes by circumstance. And when it does, you have two options. You can either cling to the life you've outgrown or step into the version of you that knows she's meant for more. I'm Gia Lacqua, trauma-informed empowerment coach and founder of Radical Prioritization. Welcome to What the Shift, the podcast for women who've outgrown the life they've built and are ready to create one that finally fits. Here we get real about the shifts that change everything: identity shifts, career pivots, relationship resets, mindset breakthroughs, and learning how to finally release what's holding you back. You don't have to have it all figured out. Just be ready for what's next. It's time to shift. If you feel like life is shifting, you are in the right place. I'm Gia Lacqua, and welcome to What the Shift. Today, I am so thrilled to introduce you to my friend, Barb Betts. Barb is a sought-after keynote speaker, CEO, and relentless advocate for building businesses rooted in relationships. With over 20 years of experience, she blends authenticity and strategy to help professionals create lasting success while staying true to themselves. As an entrepreneur and CEO, Barb equips leaders and business owners with the systems and strategies to leverage relationships for growth and success. Through her award-winning podcast, Relationships Are Your Superpower, she shows how trust-based connections lead to more referrals, loyal clients, and sustainable business models. Barb, welcome to the show. So happy to have you with us today.
Oh, thank you, Gia. Thank you for having me. I am so excited about this conversation.
Yeah, I am so looking forward to it. So tell us, I love reading a great bio, and yours is fantastic. But tell us, aside from the roles, aside from all the titles, who is Barb underneath it all?
So, well, I guess it's still a role and it's still a title, but my most proud, obviously, title is mom and wife. I have two amazing, incredible, very much adult children, which I can't believe I can say now. I am married to the best human on the planet. We're getting ready to celebrate our 28th wedding anniversary in next month. Actually just a month away. And, but beyond that, I would say I'm a passionate friend. I am a confidence supporter and booster. I am a very engaged person in everyone that I surround myself with. And I probably sometimes honestly care too much about others, which, like we talked about before, and when you were on my podcast is definitely something from my past. But I probably care a little too much sometimes. That's who I really am deep down inside.
Oh, I love that. I appreciate your authenticity and your honesty and your vulnerability.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And I would add that you just exude positive energy and love wherever you go.
That is so sweet. I will take that. I will own that, and I appreciate that.
I think you forgot that part, so I want to put that in there for you.
I try very hard.
So let's start with relationships. You talk about relationships are your superpower in life, in business. Our audience, as you know, is high achieving women. Tell us, what do we get wrong about relationships?
First and foremost, we take them for granted. Period. Hard stop. Right? I don't find any audience or any person that I speak to or I teach or I train or I coach who ever argues with me that it's about relationships, right? That business and life, leadership, sales, your own friend circles, your family, you can't tell me one human interaction that isn't based on some kind of a relationship, right? Whether it's a good or bad relationship, there's still a relationship there. And in my opinion, where we get it wrong and what I've been so passionate about in my work is that we take them for granted. Right? We know it's about relationships. We know that relationships are the catalyst to our success in life and business and leadership, but we take them for granted and we're not intentional about them. And we think that relationships are how many contacts you have in your phone or how many social media followers you have, right? Or how many people know you at the baseball field. And those are called contacts. They're not relationships. And so how do we turn those contacts and focus those lists that we have into real deep-rooted relationships?
Interesting. So talk to us about, why do we fall into this trap of taking relationships for granted, and what should we start to do differently?
Yeah, I think the real answer is we've never been taught how to actually build and nurture and deepen relationships. right? We've been taught that relationships are something that is elusive or a feel good factor or something that is just warm and fuzzy. I don't believe that. I believe that part of the issue is we haven't been taught as humans. There's no skills in school where you're taught how to actually build relationships. You're not taught how to be a good friend. You're not taught how to have friendships, right? You're just told go play with your friends. And so we start connecting the dots as these other people that we're surrounded with are our friends, which ultimately is true over time, but we're just not given a playbook for it. And I
Right.
think what I've uncovered in my 20 years of doing this in sales, and then also realizing kind of where my life journey has taken me, and it really started in my childhood, I've worked myself backwards to understand why I've been so intentional about relationships my whole life. I used to think it was just in sales. I used to think it was just in business. And it's really been as becoming a corporate keynote speaker full time and a thought leader and being hired to speak on all these stages is where I've really realized, wait a minute, I've been doing this my whole life. And I finally uncovered the reason why. And so I think that at the end of the day, I just want people to understand that there is a science behind building relationships and you can systemize them, even though that sounds transactional, it's not, right? And you can make them an intentional part of your daily activities and skills and whatever you do in life, whether it's being a stay-at-home mom or running a high, you're a CEO at a high, big, top 100 company. There's still strategic ways that you can build these relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talked about the transactional aspect of business, which I want to come back to. But since you opened the door for why relationships are the core of your business and so important to your life, tell us more about that.
Yeah, I wish I had. I now when I share this story from stage, I always say people ask me, and this is kind of how it came. I would get off stage and people would be like, "How did you realize building relationships was so important? Like what clicked in your head?" And I really had to sit with that question for a moment. Like, I don't
Sure.
actually know. I'm like, oh, well, I built a whole business around it and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's not really where it started. And so I wish I had some fancy, shiny story to tell you. But really it started when I was a little girl. And I was an only child. And although I was very well taken care of by my parents, this is not a bash on the parenting skills at all. I was an only child that was awkward. I was overweight. I wasn't popular. I wore glasses. I had a port wine stain birthmark on my face. And I just wasn't cute. And let's face it, when kids are little, they are already starting to learn about vanity and who's popular and who's attractive and who gets all the attention. And I wasn't that kid. I was the kid that got picked last for everything, right? Last for kickball, last for any kind of group project. And I wasn't the kid that got invited to all the slumber parties. I was that kid that was left out. And I didn't have a word for it then, right? But I
Mhm.
know what that feeling of loneliness feels like. And then fast forward to my middle school and high school years, where I became an only child who also was a latchkey child. And for anyone that didn't grow up in the 80s and the early 90s, right, a latchkey kid was someone who went home every day from school, walked home by herself. Now, let's face it, in 2025, most kids don't walk around by themselves. They
Nope.
have friends, right? The world has changed so much. But back then, we walked home from school by ourselves. And I would come home to an empty house and I would let myself in. And I would literally go make a plate of Triscuits and cheddar cheese. And I would turn on the TV for background noise to try to pretend that I wasn't lonely. And I always say there wasn't any siblings running around. There wasn't parents waiting at the door asking me how my day was. It was just me by myself. And I would sit there and I would stare at the phone waiting for it to ring, just hoping someone would invite me over. And I remember summers where I would wake up in the morning, my parents were already gone to work. I'd wake up and entertain myself all day long and just sit there and wait and hope that someone would call. And so I didn't know what it was then, but it was disconnection. It was loneliness. And what I now know is when you know what something feels like to not have something, you will fight every day of your life to have it. And I think that's why I turned into this person who valued human and valued human connection and friendships and relationships because I know what it feels like to not have any of those things.
Mm.
And then I think it just kind of spiraled and developed over the years. And then I built a business around it. And then I realized this is the key to success. And now I speak on stages. And frankly, all my stage not performance, all my stage opportunities are because of relationships. So like, I just realized that they are the key to success. They're the key to happiness. In my keynote, I talk about the US Surgeon General in 2023 did a study, and he actually identified loneliness as an epidemic and on the same level of urgency as obesity and addiction. And that kind of woke me up. I was like, wow, I'm not crazy, right? So what I always say is my story of loneliness isn't my story anymore. It's all of our stories. We feel so connected because we've got all these tools and ways to communicate with people, but yet we're more disconnected than ever.
Yeah, you just gave me chills with your story. That is incredible on how your journey led you to where you are and the fact that it wasn't obvious for you. That is
Oh, it wasn't. That's the crazy part.
yeah.
And it's only been really transparently, Gia, in the last 6 months. And it was
Wow.
actually what happened was I was at a keynote speaking community event, a community I belong to of keynote speakers. And one of our mentors that formed the community, one of the founding partners, he was on stage. His name's Seth. And he asked, "What's the story behind your message that you're not telling that needs to be told?" And that was when it kind of all hit me.
Perfect.
And I was like,
Yeah,
you know what? I don't think this just started in business. I think this started when I was a kid. And then I just
100%.
started, kind of marinating on it, thinking about it. I'm a big subconscious mind person. I'm a big, like, don't tell anybody what you're thinking, and your brain figures it out. And then you just throw it up on somebody. My husband's always like, when did you come up with that? I'm like, I'm 6
Yeah.
months ago. And he's like, wow. Yeah, it's taken a lot of work. It's taken a lot of self-reflection, a lot of journaling, and a lot of just thinking back to my childhood to help me understand where this really came from.
Unbelievable. That's really incredible. So going back to, you mentioned transactions and we talk about business and we live in a very results driven, action oriented world. So how do you teach people to prioritize trust and relationships over just results?
Yeah, so it's understanding that if you want short quick wins, right? If you want to constantly live your life and your business always chasing the next lead, always starting over, right? Always building the new business plan every single year, then go ahead and keep working transactionally. But if you want long-term success, if you want a business and life and leadership that you can rely on, that constant stream of humans coming to you that want to work with you, that want to be with you, that want to stay with you, that want to be loyal, like no matter what role you play, whether you're in sales, whether you're in leadership, whether you're a CEO, right? If you want a consistent stream of people around you that believe in you and support you and bring business to you and bring value to you and help your revenue and your bottom line, then focus on relationships, right?
Mhm.
Because relationships are the long-term win, which is why when I talk about transactional or cold strategies, I'm talking about cold calling and door knocking and mass emailing and automations and all these things that we've been taught are the key to success. In my opinion, the key to long-term success is deep-rooted relationships because they're something you can actually rely on and there's something that you can actually control, right? I always say a relationship can't happen without you. So you are actually in control of it. And so that's why we have to create some kind of structure and system around them, or you're human and these relationships are going to drift away, right? Like relationships aren't something where you did something wrong or you're a bad person if you're just human, which is why I teach a system around how do we stay in consistent contact so that these relationships don't drift away.
Mhm. It makes sense. So we have, as you sort of alluded to, an abundance of relationships, and sometimes we are surrounded by people, but can still feel that loneliness. So, what would you say, in your opinion, Barb, is the most important relationship? Because we think about we have customers and clients, and we have a boss, and we have a partner, and we might have kids, and is it God? Like, what is the most important relationship in your?
My opinion, the most important relationship above anything or anyone else is the one you have with yourself. The relationship we have with ourself is the most important. And one of my mantras is that you can't have an authentic relationship with anyone else until you have one with yourself. And I learned this through my adult journey, right? I learned why I was not, even though I was building these relationships, I wasn't being myself. Therefore, I was building relationships that weren't authentic and real because they were buying into a version of me that wasn't really me. And so once I figured out that deep rooted, that's where my confidence came from. So,
Mm.
I always did good in business and sales by building relationships, staying in touch with people, all the things. But my real breakthrough in life was through my confidence journey, which was all from figuring out that authentic relationship with myself and actually peeling back the layers and loving who I am and being proud of who I am. And then that person started showing up on appointments and in front of others.
And it shifted everything, I'm
It
sure.
shifted everything.
Yeah. I
Everything.
love that. I
Yeah.
love that. And so, a lot of us do become disconnected from ourselves. I think as high achieving women in particular, I think what you just said actually is the core of what people call imposter syndrome. I think it's a
Correct.
disconnection from self. I won't get into that tangent today, but I guess how, from your perspective, can we reconnect with who we actually are?
Yeah. So I think it's by defining what authenticity actually is. I'm so tired of this word. I speak on it. I get paid to speak on it, but I'm actually tired of the word because it's so misunderstood.
Yep. So tell
Right.
us that's a great
Yeah,
point. What
I'm
does
like,
authenticity mean?
even if you know what authenticity is, the person next to you has a completely different definition of
Yeah.
it, right?
Great point.
And you'll hear things like real and vulnerable. And I think people think authenticity is like throwing up your true thoughts and feelings on people, right? And I disagree. I think everyone should still have a filter in life, right?
Yeah.
Like every thought you think should not be an expressed thought. What I think authenticity is authenticity isn't about doing anything, which is why just be yourself drives me crazy, because just be yourself, when you use the word be, you're actually talking about an action. I don't think you need to do anything. I think authenticity is undoing everything that isn't you. And so, how do we pull down these walls and layers of protection that we have put over ourselves to keep ourselves safe? Because that's where your real, authentic human that you are lives, deep down in there. But as women, especially in our generation, which I think most of your listeners are, we have had years of ouches and oops, I'm not going to be accepted if I act that way, even though that's what I really think. I'm not going to be included. People are going to talk about me if I wear that outfit to the conference. All of those things cause us to put these walls up, and we have to start undoing it. We have to undo everything that isn't us so that the real us can shine through.
Incredible. So the masks that we wear as a result of societal conditioning, cultural conditioning, how we grew up, the environment in which we were raised. But then also you said something really important, which are the experiences we've had. I love how you called them the ouch moments that we've had along the way. And those can leave behind some invisible wounds.
Oh my goodness. And you know this, right? With
Yeah.
your trauma background, you know this. And this is
Absolutely.
why I got to my childhood. We're like,
Yeah.
where did all this come from? Well, it came from being intensely made fun of as a child, right? It came from being left out. Why I put these walls up was it was my way of protecting myself and figuring out how to be included, right? Instead of figuring out how to be confident in who I am. So that person shows up and I attract the right people to me.
Absolutely. So, so powerful. I love that. So, one thing I hear a lot with the women I work with is they are scared or worried to show up authentically at work because it doesn't feel professional, or maybe it doesn't feel safe because what we just talked about is the version of you that's gotten the applause, that's achieved the success, may not be who you are at your core. So, how do you teach women who are scared to show up as their authentic self? What would you say to her?
Yeah, so I give 4 permissions. So in my messaging, I talk about this limitless confidence formula where it's not about adding anything to your life. It's about giving you permissions to be yourself, to stop hiding, to undo all those walls. And the 4 permissions are the first one is stop hiding, right? I always say when you hide who you are, you limit who you can become, right? And when we're hiding these things about ourselves that really make up who we are, that could be your story, that could be something physical about you, that could be something you're struggling with, right? That's where you create this vulnerability and this relatability where people are like, wow, you're human too. Right? You have challenges too. And I learned that in my life through my hair loss journey and also how I was showing up on social, perfect, having perfect days, nothing ever went wrong, all my achievements, and not ever saying that I had a bad day, right? And the second you let down that wall and you stop hiding and you just let your quirks and your personality and everything. Now, you mentioned professional, right? And I do think there's this balance. Let's just say you're really loud. You're just a loud person. Well, potentially that could be overbearing in the wrong environment. So we do have to have this emotional intelligence and
Sure.
awareness to filter ourselves into the right situations. I do believe that. But don't take away your loudness. Don't take away your boldness. Don't take away what you're not afraid to say. Just tone it down. I'm a very loud person. I can start yelling when I'm getting excited and talking, and it sounds like I'm mad at people. I've had to learn to tone that down, but still deliver the same message,
Mhm.
right? The second that I talk about is how do we reframe comparison? Because I think part of our authenticity journey and our issues with authenticity is because we are constantly comparing ourselves to someone else. And I always talk about how we have to reframe comparison with curiosity. Use that comparison as a catalyst to say, if Gia did it, I can do it too, but I'm going to do
Mhm.
it my own way.
Mhm.
When we get caught in this comparison trap, it truly is the thief of authenticity because we are comparing ourselves to someone else who's not us. And I always make a joke in my keynote. I always ask all the identical twins to raise their hand, and I give them a little bit of a free pass because they do have pretty much exact DNA as somebody else. But the rest of us have zero excuses,
Right.
right? And then the next permission is to stop seeking approval. And I think that's another place that women really struggle with, right? And when I talk about stop seeking approval, it's about self-doubt and imposter syndrome. And it's about this whole idea of we have to understand that self-doubt and imposter syndrome is actually a good thing. I'm tired of it being put in this negative container. I'm tired of people telling that you have imposter syndrome, which means you're a fake or a fraud. No, imposter syndrome actually means you're growing. It means you're stepping into the next version of you that
Yes.
doesn't feel ready, but you're put in that position because you are. And you've got to grow through it. And so, how do we reframe these things so we can pull down these layers and stop using self doubt and imposter syndrome as an excuse? Stop
Mhm.
comparing ourselves to others and saying, I can't do that because she's already done it, or I can't do that. I'm not as good as her. I'm not as pretty as her. I don't have hair like her. I don't have style like her. I don't have the PhD like her. Right. And then, how do we stop hiding? How do we, like you said, put down the mask, like put it down and start living who we really are?
Yeah, absolutely. That is so incredibly impactful. So when you say stop hiding, for you, I know for me, and I might have shared this story with you as a leader in the corporate world for so many years, trying to be more like a man, trying to fit in, trying to do what I thought I was supposed to do. I know for me, I had one of the things I hid was my innate nurturing ability. Like I am a nurturer at my core. But until later, not until later in my leadership, did I let that side of me come out. I even remember when like back in the day when people started wearing jeans, like jeans became acceptable to wear to work. First it was jeans Friday and then, then the casual dress code. I remember thinking to myself, if I don't wear jeans, my team won't wear jeans. And I found that when everybody was more comfortable, they were more authentic. They actually were able to show up as themselves and myself included. And so one of the things when I became a coach that somebody had known me for many years said to me, and she said, "You're such a nurturer." And I felt so exposed. I felt like somebody ripped off my clothes. I was like, "Oh, she sees me." And it made me realize, no, that's actually one of my superpowers.
Correct.
So, what was that for you? What did you hide that eventually you realized was actually your superpower?
Yeah, for me, it was my hair loss journey. So I've suffered from hair loss my entire adult life. I'm almost bald on top of my head. This all started happening in my late 20s and early 30s, and my hair would get thinner and I would cut it shorter and I would have this widening part that my hairdressers just told me my hair was too heavy. That wasn't true. And I visited a hair transplant surgeon in my early 40s who read life into me and said, Barb, you have 3 strikes in the hair department. I have autoimmune disease, a thyroid problem, and my dad was bald at 25. So anyone who tells you your hair pattern follows your mother, they don't know what they're talking about. Go see a geneticist, right? And he said, all of our hair is pre-programmed to fall out at a certain time in our life, and yours is programmed to fall out now. I can do the hair transplant, but it's not going to work. It's going to work and it's going to fall out. It's going to work and it's going to fall out. And you're going to be very frustrated with me because we just don't see the same results in women that we see in men. And it's definitely never going to get as long as you want, right? When people talk about hair transplants in men, it's because they only need short stubbles to have a head full of hair. Well, women want typically long hair or longer hair. And so I made the decision to figure something out because I was like, I'm too young. I just don't want to be bald. I mean, yes, I can own it. And yes, I can own my hair loss, but I also want to feel beautiful in my own skin. I want to be able to curl my hair, all the things. So I went and explored human hair alternatives. And I'll never forget the day I walked in and I went in for a topper, which is where you clip full length extension piece on top of your bio hair and it hangs over your hair. So you use the density you have on the bottom because most women lose their hair on the top and it's called female pattern baldness. We don't lose it around the back like men do. And so she walked in, my consultant Ashley walked in and she said, I don't think the topper is going to work for you. You don't have enough bio hair on top of your head to clip the clips in. They have to attach to something. It's going to be painful. It's going to pull them out. It's going to feel like you're pulling baby hairs out of your head. And then she's like, I suggest you try on a wig. And I turned and looked at her like she had 3 heads and foam coming out of her mouth. I'm like, you are insane. There is no chance. I think at the time I was 42 and I was like, I'm too young to wear a wig. There's a stigma behind wigs. Wigs look fake. There's no chance. You're crazy. And my daughter was 20 at the time, Mandy, and she turned and looked at me and she was like, Mom, do you know how many women wear full length extensions? You just need help in a different area. And truthfully, Gia, that statement changed my life because I was like, how could I argue with that? She was right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I made the decision to try on the wig and I obviously purchased the wigs. If you're watching this video, you're now very confused and you're like, wow, she must have taken a really good vitamin or a drug came out. No, this is a wig and I wear human hair wigs full time. But here's what changed. What changed for me was I made the very courageous decision that I wanted to be public about this because I didn't want to have people whisper around me or be like, is she sick? What happened to her? I was like, you know what? I only know one way to do this. Let's just put it out on social media, right? And so I did. I ripped the Band-Aid off. I put a post of me with no hair on and my new wig on the first day I wore it. And I shared my story with the world, the fear, the embarrassment, the journey, and it changed my life. And it changed my life because what I realized was I was hiding who I really was, right? I was holding on to a version of me that no longer existed. And the more I shared that journey and the more I still to this day, almost 5 years, I'm going to be 5 years in July, 5 years later, tell this story and share this with the world and very comfortably. You've seen me on social media, hair on, hair off. I talk about it. I take it off. I'll take it off in a restaurant if a friend asks me to. I don't care. That, to your point, gave others permission to do the same. And when someone sees you show up vulnerable and real and authentic, and it also creates this trust. What happened in our sales business was at the time all of this happened, I had slowly started to stop doing day-to-day listing appointments and things. My husband pretty much was doing our day-to-day sales, and he would go on appointments and clients would say to him, I love how Barb's showing up right now. You know, we always trusted you guys, but like when someone shows up that way, it just gives you this different level of trust in them. And that's when I realized that's the key to trust is when someone knows they're working with someone who's real and relatable and someone they can have this two-way like admiration with. That's when they know if you're going to show up that way about your hair loss journey, you're not going to show up differently in our transaction relationship.
Yeah.
So that's really when the game changer happened for me was just realizing I'm not perfect. Nobody else is perfect either. And if me going first helps, I just thought I was going to help other women, right? With hair loss. That's what in my head, that's what I was doing.
No.
What I didn't expect was this like shift across many different demographics, sexes, male and female. I got DMs about you just gave me the courage to tell my husband that I binge eat at the middle of the night. Like I have an alcohol problem. Like I got people sending me the craziest things all because I went first. And so I think that that's what we're hiding really is who we really are and our wounds. And it doesn't mean you have to throw up your story on the world, right? I certainly don't say that everyone has to go on social media, but just start with telling one friend, start with telling your partner that you live with.
Yep.
And you'll start to see your life change.
And that's where your power is. And that's where the shift starts.
Correct. It is literally what has transformed my life and my career. It's transformed our sales business. It's definitely transformed my speaking career. And it was all just because I had the courage to do it. And I was just kind of tired of my own BS. I was tired of living behind this, doubt and imposter syndrome world I was living in. And my girlfriends, it's so funny. My girlfriends, after it all happened, they're like, Barb, you're so much more confident now. And I'm like, I didn't just put hair on my head and become confident overnight. That's not reality. That person was always inside of me. She was just waiting for me to finally let her show up. And the hair loss is what caused me to let her show up.
You had to let her out. Mm-hmm. Your story is absolutely incredible, inspirational, and the ripple effect that you have is truly amazing. So thank you for showing up and for being you, for being here. Just before we wrap up, Barb, I know we talked about a lot, but what would you say is the one shift that changed everything?
For me, honestly, I used to think it was hair loss. And I shouldn't say, there can't just be one. There's been a few, right? I would say that when I speak and when I talk about confidence, I talk about these 17 moments, and I talk about these 17 moments. And to summarize what a 17 moment is it's just simply something I named because my first big shift in life happened when I was 17, when I got pregnant. Weeks after I graduated high school, I found out I was pregnant. And so that was my first big shift. And so I've had multiple 17 moments throughout my life, right? My hair loss was definitely one of them, but I think I'm living in probably the biggest shift right now. And that is what we talked about at the beginning. It's really connecting back to my childhood and realizing where this all came from, because now I speak on it in a completely different way. And when I used to share an opening story that was good and it was cute and it was funny, but it wasn't really didn't really inspire anybody. And now when I tell this only child story and I connect it to loneliness and disconnection, I think everyone sees that in themselves. And so I think I'm in my biggest shift right now, which is kind of identifying where this all came from. But again, that is something I had to unhide from because I kept that little girl bottled up, right? Like I didn't like to talk about how awkward and weird I was and lonely I was. And then I was also afraid, quite frankly, I didn't tell it for a while because I was afraid of shaming my parents. I was an only child. I was spoiled to pieces. I had a credit card at 16 years old. Doesn't mean that I had human connection. And so I had everything I needed to live and breathe and eat and write and be healthy, but I didn't have the number one thing that we need in life, which is human connection.
And we all have that version of ourselves, that little girl who we locked in the basement and threw away the key.
I love that because my girlfriend Chelsea I went through something recently with a friend and it was pretty terrible. And she said, when Chelsea was helping me through my part of it, and she said, just remember, we're all still 8-year-old little girls inside. Yep. And I will never, that statement I will never forget for the rest of my life because it's really true.
Absolutely. So your biggest shift was your healing journey, which I love.
It's a healing journey right now. Yeah. And I'm in it. Right. And that just proves that you don't just have one shift in life. You call it a shift. I call it a 17 moment. And I promise you, I always say these moments, these shifts, it's where you meet your most authentic self. It's just, we find that person and then we start covering it up. And so how do we use these permissions I shared with you to go back to and uncover that person that lived with you through that shift or that 17 moment?
Yeah, it's a choice. And so I love the framework you have about the permission. You have a choice in that moment. You can keep pretending, or you can give yourself permission. Yeah. Is it hard? Yes. Speaking your truth is hard, but staying stuck and invisible is harder.
100 times harder.
Love that. Ugh, got the chills. Barb, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your insight, your story, and your expertise. Truly, you are amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Where can our listeners find you and tune into your podcast?
So podcast relationships are your superpower anywhere the podcasts are found. I love to hang out on Instagram. I always say Instagram is my jam. So I'm just at Barb Betts. And then I also spend a lot of time over on LinkedIn, which is where I share most of my thought leadership and blogs and articles and all kinds of stuff. So yeah.
Perfect. Amazing. Thank you so much again, Barb. It was great having you on the show.
Thank you, Gia.
All right, Shifter, that's a wrap on today's episode of What the Shift. But here's the thing. Awareness is just the first step. The real shift happens when you decide to do something with it. So before you go back to business as usual, ask yourself, what is one thing you are done carrying? What's one shift you're ready to make? And if this episode hit home, don't keep it to yourself. Hit subscribe, leave a review, and send it to a woman who needs to hear this, because we shift together. Remember, you don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to take the next step. And I'll be right here next week, ready to shift with you. This is What the Shift, and we are just getting started.